I'm used to Stanley Nyerungita. It is Junior Friday. Kidogo tuanze kusema, thank God it's Friday. A lot of conversations happening today. First off, the fact that President William Ruto is in China. Leader Raila Odinga.
Oh yes, and that will form our biggest discussion this morning. Kenya-China ties. What exactly does this visit by the president portend for Kenya? So we'll be looking at the benefits as well as the potential benefits with this experts in research policy and international relations, Ambassador Dr. Josephine Ojiambo and Wilfred Muliro Nasongo.
Oh yes. And then conversations about matters health, kidney diseases, the functions, the parts, as well as the management, and then also looping in the kidney donation as well will be, as well as even the transplant will be here. Joy Magana, she is a clinical officer helping us understand that. Alafu juu Friday inakaribia na weekend inakaribia, lazima ujue how to let loose.
Oh yeah.
Sweat kidogo. Ruti Gosrani will be also joining us. She is a yoga teacher for Fitness Thursday. You don't want to miss that as well.
Quick look at the dailies this morning. Proposed revenue law raises a storm. Talks about the COG and a new plan that will change how much money goes to the counties, what kind of formula they use. That's a big story on the front page of the Standard. Today you'll realize there's no agreement on what the big story is.
Yes.
On the Daily Nation, a different
Two words here. Raila retires Kusha.
Alafu hii gazeti ni kama wameanza kuadopt ile style ya Mwananchi. Wanajaza story mingi just all over the place, blah blah blah. Okay. Anyway, we'll come back to take a look at those stories. Agenti mwingine wa shetani.
Now, you remember on Tuesday we were saying that you only see some headlines in Tanzania. Now,
tumefikiwa. Finally. Agenti huyu, lakini pastor. Tutakueleza maneno haya zaidi tukirejelea magazetini baadaye.
On the Star, county workers join lecturers in boycott threats. As you're saying, no similar headline throughout this dailies.
They are varied. Okay, at least there's still photos of what's happening in China.
Currently, the legislators put up a spirited fight to save agencies.
Right.
The different, I think earlier on this week, on Monday, we're taking a look at some of these agencies, as well as matters health and all. The Social Security Fund was the word I was looking for, yes. Ndio finally wamepatana nazo huko.
Right.
Yes.
That's as far as Uganda is concerned. In Tanzania, very interesting. On the Citizen, they talk about the Tazara. Tazara is a Tanzania-Zambia railway. Kama ukufunzwa kwa GHC. Wewe ulipata GHC?
Nilipata kisha.
So now, with the visit by African presidents to China yesterday, Tanzania, Zambia and China yesterday signed an initial agreement for the rehabilitation of the Tazara railway that is expected to improve rail and sea transportation in resource-rich East Africa. Tazara is actually one of the main railways networks in Africa. Meanwhile, they continue to monitor how their currency, the Tanzanian shilling, is performing.
Yes.
So what they've done on the front page of the Citizen, they are comparing the Tanzanian shilling and the Kenyan shilling, and they say why a weaker shilling in East Africa is not all bad news. So they do a comparison. In September last year, the Kenya shilling vis-a-vis Tanzanian shilling, it was going for 1 Kenya shilling for 16.8 Tanzanian shillings. Now it is down to 20 shillings, 1 Kenyan shilling. It's there on the front page of the Citizen today. They've been monitoring the performance even against the dollar with the Tanzanian shilling this entire week.
And
the New Vision.
On the front page of the New Vision,
Mwananchi,
kwenye gazeti la Mwananchi, mwamba wa siasa aga aliyekuwa mwenyekiti wa chama cha Alliance for Change and Transparency, anaitwa Juma Duni Haji. Chama hiki kilikuwa cha upinzani na wamemwomboleza pale. Aliaga akiwa na miaka 73. Sema safari yake ilivyogubikwa na magumu, vigogo hao wa chama hicho wameminia sifa, watangaza kumwenzi. Vidokezo vingine pale, ziara ya Samia kule China na Tazara kicheko. Hiyo Tanzania.
So they are happy. When they say kicheko si ati wanachekelewa. Wanasema hii trip Samia Suluhu alienda China, Tazara ikafurahia. Sababu wamepata trilioni shilingi, trilioni 2.7 towards, but hizo ni fedha za Tanzania, towards rehabilitation of the Tazara railway. So yes, on one hand they do have the SGR, on the other Tazara, which is their old railway, is being revived.
Meanwhile, President William Ruto is also there to seek more funds for
extension of ISGR.
Also the Mau Summit route as well. Samia also focuses, is also featured in some of the dailies in Kenya. We'll be back to tell you which ones. Right now though, tuangalie barabara venye inakaa. Being a Thursday, you'd want to know how you'd want to get to work early alafu toke mapema because it's a Junior Friday. This section of the road, that's Haile Selassie Avenue between the August Memorial roundabout and the other Landis Road roundabout, was actually a dark red earlier on. It's just eased up right now. It was dark red on both sides, meaning there was a lot of traffic into and out of town, especially with matatus trying to get into the CBD. But it appears it has eased off. So anyone coming into the CBD using that area, it's a bit friendlier now. Let's take a look at Jogoo Road. It's building up slowly, nothing to report about. The usual trouble spots are also not problematic at this time. Makadara, it's a dull yellow, as well as once you get closer to the City Stadium roundabout, it's also dark yellow. No stretch of red so far this morning. On the other side of town, we take a look at Pangani Interchange. Yes, it's building up slowly. You can see a patch of yellow here, meaning that wameanza ile askari wanasimamisha upande moja, wanafungulia upande mwingine, waita happy hour. Happy hour, yes. Ndio watu wa Kiambu Road na watu wa Thika Road waweze kuingia town bila mushkin. On the southern part of the city, let's take a look at Mombasa Road and the expressway into town. It's looking good all the way from Syokimau past Cabanas all the way towards Nyayo Stadium and into town. Nothing to report. Hapo hakuna shida ata. Langata Road 2 is looking good at this time of day, all the way down from the southern bypass past Uhuru Gardens and the Wilson Airport. Ngong Road, not bad this morning. Adams Arcade, Prestige Plaza, that interchange there, a bit of a slowdown. Even once you get to the roundabout, the City Stadium, City Mortuary roundabout, it's a bit slow, but you need traffic, usual traffic. People wanajaribu kuingia town. And finally, the other major tributary into town and the usual trouble spot at Nairobi School. It's not looking bad. Huku ni wapi tumeenda sasa? Sure. Umeenda hadi Waiyaki wewe. Umeenda hadi Kabete. Okay, let's come back and take a look. Yes, it's building up slowly, but not really trouble. Past ABC Place into town, it's looking good this morning. So yes, that's a traffic situation. Nothing to worry about. Oh yes, tuangalia the weather updates as you're leaving the house, just to know what you're going to be wearing and how you need to look like. If you're in Nairobi and its environs, it is 14 degrees Celsius right now. The highest temperatures utapata leo ni as high as 23, and lowest right now 14 degrees. No rainfall for today. Let's take a look at in the west region, kule Bungoma, 17 degrees Celsius right now. Precipitation 50%. This means chances of it raining today is high. Actually, they say it is raining right now. Some light showers, which will increase to be above around average rainfall of 15%. This will ease and then continue to the midday and then into the evening. Some lightning and above average rainfall. Into the Rift Valley region in Kapsabet, 13 degrees, quite low. Also expect rainfall today, the midday, above average rainfall 40%, but then highs of around 22 degrees as well. That seems to look like most regions in the country might be receiving rainfall. That is also similar to Voi into the coast region as well. Highs of about 28. Expect, if you're in Voi, expect some light showers there, 40%, but all in all, the whole day is going to be receiving some warm kind of temperatures. That is as far as the weather in different parts of the country looks like. And that takes us to what you're going to be expecting in our news bulletins from 11 all the way to 9 p.m. So first off in matters sports, today, Harambee Stars continuing with a training session at the Mandela Stadium in Uganda. So Fred, they're going to be facing Zimbabwe tomorrow at around 4 p.m. there at that particular stadium. So we hope to see how that will be playing out. Back home, first off in matters security, the National Police Service Commission Chair Eliud Kinuthia will be giving an update on the police promotions as well as their salaries. It is quite a very touchy issue concerning after civil servants walifurahia wakaambiwa tutakuwa tunaongezea mishahara by the end of this month. So the fact that police officers are also civil servants, we'll wait to see how that particular update by Eliud Kinuthia will be like. Speaking of updates, Isaac Mora, he's the government spokesperson, will also be giving an update today at around 11 a.m. thereabout on matters state of the nation as well as national importance. Wait to see what he will be telling us, and we'll be giving you those live pictures. Let me take you all the way to Mombasa, where Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua is, and he has quite the itinerary for him. First off, he'll be meeting the Kenya Tea Directorate directors, the KTDA directors. He'll also be opening the Mombasa ASK show. So Senate Committee on Health will be meeting on tariffs to discuss basically matters tariffs, the social health insurance benefits, among others. That is as far as our news diary goes. Right now though, today in history.
September. In India, Teachers' Day is celebrated on September every year, commemorating the birth anniversary of Dr. Sarvepalli Radhakrishnan, a distinguished teacher, philosopher, and the second president of India. Right, extra read all about it. This is a standard this morning. Proposed revenue law raises a storm, and they say one man, one shilling. This debate is coming back. The Council of Governors has raised objections to the proposal by the Commission for Revenue Allocation to reduce the weight in its revenue sharing formula that will see 24 counties lose billions of shillings. Now, instead of thinking about how big your population is, they talk about how vast is your county. So back to the debate on one man, one shilling. So some of the counties that could lose if this revenue sharing formula is adopted include Mandera, which could lose up to 2.19 billion shillings, Kakamega 1.3 billion, Kilifi 1.1 billion, Kware, Bungoma, Meru, Narok, Nairobi, Machakos and Nakuru also stand to lose a few hundred million shillings.
Meanwhile, the winners there, Marsabit.
Oh yes.
Turkana, Kajiado, up to 1 billion.
You can imagine how big Marsabit is.
Yes,
so if at all they consider the land, then Marsabit gets more money. Turkana also is a huge county. It gets more money. So does Kajiado and Garissa. These are very huge counties.
Yes.
Do you agree with this
proposal?
This proposal. So 24 counties that will see their revenue drop by a cumulative 12 billion shillings. That's about half the counties. 23 other counties, the counties that will gain between 2.3 billion and 55 million shillings. Population weight 33%. This is a new formula, says population of a county carries a weight of 33% in the sharing. If a county is rated lowly in the poverty index, it stands to gain more. This is a very interesting debate.
Oh, yes.
And the COG says, no, your formula hatujakubaliana nayo. Yes, we said that there's not too much focus on issues to do with the China visit by President William Ruto, but Raila Odinga's actions in China have attracted at least one highlight on the front page of the Standard. They say Raila quotes presidents in China to back his AU bid, and there's a picture there of the former Prime Minister pitching his African Union Commission chairperson candidacy to 6 African presidents. He's seen there with Zambia's president, Hichilema. That's the front page of the Standard. Other quick highlights on the top strip. Indian leaders wade into Adani airport deal. China rips most in ties with Africa. Auditor shut illegal bank accounts. That's what she says. And in sports, Olunga doubts in Harambee Zimbabwe tie. So once you flip the paper to the back page of the Standard, they're talking about matters Harambee Stars. Harambee Stars, Kenya's national football team, are in the final stages of preparation for their 2025 Africa Cup of Nations qualifiers campaign set to kick off tomorrow.
And get this, Olunga, who's a captain, will not be featuring there because of an injury. He was not given the green light by the medics, so it's an absence for him.
Okay, and we have a picture there of Kenya's tactician, Harambee Stars coach Ngen Firat, instructing his charges during a training session at Police Sacco Stadium, Nairobi on Sunday. Part of the preparations there.
Kama wanahitaji hiyo engine ya Ngen.
Elsewhere matters, Paralympics, Ojuka saves Kenya's blushes. This is Kenya's Paralympic long jump silver medalist Samson Ojuka with gold medalist Brian Lionel from Argentina and bronze winner Cado Evangelista of Brazil on Tuesday.
Secured a silver medal there.
Congratulations to Samson Ojuka kwa kupata medali ya shaba.
Oh yes.
How many further?
Raila retires is the big headline on Daily Nation in bold, and the photo of Azimio leader Raila Odinga. And they say the Orange Party is planning for Odinga's exit as early as next month. Good photo, good choice photo there. They say for nearly 2 decades, former Prime Minister Raila Odinga has been the undisputed leader of the Orange Democratic Movement. But he will soon call it quits as he eyes the African Union Commission chairperson seat. And as you're saying, there are quite a number of headlines there.
It's a busy front page.
On this front page. So something that we promised we'll be telling you, it's featured on page 10 of this Daily Nation. They say Tigania cult, Meru pastor radicalized followers, sexually exploited women. Let's flip to that page so that you get the context of this story on page 10. They say church members say Mururu will slaughter a goat and draw a sign of the cross on their foreheads and tongues using a bloodied finger. Where? There's a quote there by EAPC head. EAPC is the East African Pentecostal Churches of Kenya branch. He said before villagers took that action, he posted a new pastor there, but some members of the church rejected him. We sought police intervention. That's a very dicey conversation.
Yes, and the report is that Daniel Mururu, this pastor, was arrested at his home near Kianjai Market yesterday morning for exploiting the innocence of villagers to radicalize them and sexually exploit women and girls. This is according to Tigania West Police Commander Robinson Langat.
It started all the way in 2018. You can dig on this on page 10. Brings up the whole conversation about to make sure churches
regulating churches,
the regulating churches. That whole report was out. We'll wait to see how this will be effective. Other conversations on the front page of Daily Nation. Pale chini, very beautiful photo there of the African leaders posing with China's president Xi Jinping and the wife Peng Liyuan. You know, this reminds me in Sheng, the Gen Z lingo of when you call a girl, it's called you can call her Peng. Yes.
It's Chinese.
So nikama it was derived from China. But yeah, I mean, you have that photo, and this reminds me of ile Africa Summit, and was it early this year? And guys talking about how African leaders had to travel out of Africa for an African summit instead of just instead of just visiting.
It's the same, but the beauty of this photo is the fact that they have their spouses with them.
Oh yeah,
it's interesting. Even Xi Jinping has his spouse there.
Yes, also seeing First Lady Rachel Ruto there. Other conversations: new rules to curb exam cheating. Remember, this is that term for exams. For KCSE, new rules to curb exam cheating assessments set to start next month, and that takes us to the back page. They talk about new guidelines issued to curb cheating. Teacher Service Commission as well as the Kenya National Examination Council have made some changes in how national examinations are administered. That in a nutshell is the Daily Nation. We'll be back to take a look at what is inset in the cartoons, but kwenye gazeti la Taifa Leo
habari hiyo ambayo tumeiona kwenye ukurasa wa mbele wa Daily Nation iko hapa, ndio habari kuu kwenye ukurasa wa mbele wa Taifa Leo. Ajenti mwingine wa shetani, wanauliza swali pale. DCI aeleza Pastor Mururu alivyozoea kunyunyuzia waumini damu ya mbuzi na kufanya mapenzi na waumini wa kike. Aha. Mambo yamechemka kule Meru. Masuala ya dini. Pastor Daniel Mururu aliyetiwa mbaroni jana anatarajiwa kuchunguzwa kwa mafunzo ya itikadi kali, unajisi wa wasichana na kuwafanyia waumini wa kike dhulma za kingono hata kwenye madhabahu. Habari kamili kwenye ukurasa wa pili wa hili gazeti, na kuna picha ya yule anayeshtumiwa kufanya mambo haya. Kwingineko, masuala ya elimu. Walimu wakataa kufungua shule kule Lamu. Wanasema walimu wasema bila usafiri wa ndege hawarudi shule kamwe. Tunataka ndege.
Yes.
Masuala ya uchaguzi wa Marekani. Harris bado mbele ya Trump. Kura ya maoni ya hivi punde yampa makamu wa rais 50.8 na Trump 49.2.
Hamala. Hamala.
Masuala ya Mpox. Taita wakanywa nyama pori. Wataalamu waonya wakazi dhidi ya kula nyama mwitu kuzuia maambukizi ya Mpox. Masuala ya siasa pale juu. Siasa za Afrika, AU, Raila Odinga. Masuala ya ODM pia. Raila astaafu uongozi wa chama chake, ajiondoa uongozi wa ODM ili kumakinika kiti cha mwenyekiti wa AUC. So going forward utasema ODM leader. Hiyo imeisha sasa. Useme former prime minister.
Former prime minister ama AUC candidate.
Yes.
AUC chair candidate.
Tukizingatia siasa za chama, vita vya Omar na Gachagua, viongozi mlimani wamtaka Sarai akome kudunisha naibu kiongozi wa UDA. Huyu ndio SG aliye replace yule anaitwa Cleo Malala.
Omar ataambiwa ufanye kitu yote lakini usiguse
mlima. Gazeti la Taifa Leo hilo.
On the Star, matters devolution, they talk about county workers join lecturers in boycott threats. The employees say they are discriminated against in the current salary adjustment for the national government counterparts. They saw the national government and the civil servants being told that announcement by public CES, Muturi, Justin
public
Muturi,
service, yes.
Yeah, public service, and him saying that civil servants utapata ongeza ya mshahara, wanasema na sisi je. So we'll be following up on that for you. So do actually stick around for more details from the county workers today. Other conversations, a photo that also captures President William Ruto, AUC candidate, AUC chair candidate Raila Odinga there, smiling, and Raila Odinga courting for his candidature. Other conversations matters weather. A level is how the Star tupatianga masuala ya weather updates. They say drought in eastern, weak La Nina to depress short rains. I believe that's why we're also seeing the trend in most parts of the country.
We should get people from Kenya Meteorological Department to come and tell us more about the weather we expect in October. The expectation is that there's going to be short rains, but now they're saying that there will be a weak La Nina that comes after El Nino. So authorities should prepare for possible drought in large swaths of eastern Kenya caused by a La Nina that is expected to develop this month. This is according to the Meteorological Department.
Other conversations, if you're in Nakuru, listen to this. There's sinkholes which are forming there after heavy downpour, and you're being told be cautious on that and exercise caution. Other conversations, Pale Ju at his power, you might have seen this face during the Gen Z demonstrations. I always love when I see Gen Z on any front page nowadays, because
I think I've seen you on a cartoon somewhere, so it's okay. Tunawaachia space kwa cartoon.
At his power, says activist using theatre to fight police brutality. That is a Star for you can get that. Ni shilingi 60 tu. 60.
They say smart people read the Star.
Yes.
Grab a copy. Matters business. Costly fuel looms on push for bigger oil dealer profits. EPRA-backed study proposes extra 4 shillings 45 cents per litre. So it means that kama unalipa 169 itarudi over 170 huko.
Wow.
Proposal could add to the cost of living pressure. So expect that by mid this month, fuel prices will go up.
And it's always a ripple effect. Mafuta ikiongezeka, una mtu wako
fare inaongezeka, hata ule mwenye na kisiagi inapanda juu.
Hata unga.
Wametajia masuala ya Gen Z. Gen Z protests force farms to trim jobs for the first time this year. So at least you had an effect.
Oh yes.
You did, huh?
Oh yes.
Okay.
A big effect actually.
That's the front page of the Business Daily on the People Daily.
From BD to PD, fake jobs. They say the rotten agencies robbing youths and taking advantage of desperate Kenyans. Entities charge those seeking opportunities upwards of 700,000 cash shillings for jobs abroad, only to vanish into thin air. We've seen most of those conversations happening. Zile cases are Eldoret, Nini, and they've listed those deregistered job hunters and some of these agencies as well. So you can keenly look at the front page of People Daily. Hapo uangalie, have you been in contact with some of these agencies? Well, they have been deregistered. Other conversations matters, education, relief as state releases cash for schools. On page 5, inaonyesha picha watoto wakirudi shule. Alafu conversation yenye najua utakuwa nayo leo, Raila woos Francophone Africa.
Hapo kuna picha ya Rais William Ruto and former Prime Minister Raila Odinga holding talks with President Mahamat Idris Deby of Chad, which is one of the Francophone countries. They discuss support for Raila's candidature. So wale wanasema if French-speaking countries will not support Raila Odinga. Kuna kazi inaendelea kule China. You never know. They just might. Let's take a look at the cartoons now before we wrap up this news review. And this is the Standard today. They talk about smarter civil servants and the UD administration, which is sitting on their shoulders. And you talk about phase 2 of the CBA. So kuna ile carrot and stick. Wakisema wataenda ku-strike wanaambiwa ndio hii kitu hapa. Iko shida gani? Tuenda phase 2 hata uone iko hapo mbele sinona.
Na hata county workers wanaweza patiwa a similar.
Hata county workers watapewa karoti yao tu. Watulie waache maneno.
On People Daily, they have this gentleman here. The bed is written DCI, so we'll assume that the gentleman is also working for DCI.
He's actually sleeping.
He's busy sleeping, and he's holding a big magnifying glass. And the bed is under so many papers.
These are the number of cases they're looking at.
Silence, please. DCI solving top murder cases.
But wanangorota. And you remember a few weeks ago when they came out and sensationally claimed that they had actually arrested someone who confessed to the murder of 42 women who were discovered, whose bodies were discovered at Kware. And then weeks later, the guy just walks out of a prison, police custody, and disappears. They are yet to arrest him. How quickly did they arrest him the first time? And you wonder, okay,
comparing right now,
if you could arrest him that easily the first time, you can do it again.
Yeah.
But as Stano says in this cartoon, Wamelala deadly. On the Daily Nation matters police as well, and the kind of police brutality going on. Police service acting IG. He's claiming on one hand law and order, but on the other hand, ameweka kichwa ndani ya sand, hiding your head in the sand so that they cannot see the court order. What court order? Remember, the judiciary had ordered them to actually conduct themselves differently. Don't arrest people with balaclavas on their heads. Don't cover yourself. Have your tag, name tag, as well as your serial number there. Wameignore your maneno. So, law and order, what court order?
Yes.
Who said that? Those are the cartoons this morning.
And finally on the Star, fearless, tribeless, leaderless. There's a gentleman there holding that placard.
Umepatikana kwa cartoon leo.
So
what's happening in this cartoon?
And in athletics,
there are people who are quick to run towards 2027, but it would appear they're forgetting that behind them the Gen Zs are still there. So even as you aspire to win elections come 2027, remember pale nyuma
Gen Z
wako.
Bado tuko.
Na watakusalamia.
Bado tupo.
That's the Star.
Conversations for today that leo najua unaenda away from the norm on State of the Nation.
Yes, today we are looking at Kenya-China ties. That will be our main focus in our discussion this morning. Do stand by for that. We'll be having these two eminent persons, Ambassador Dr. Josephine Ojiambo and Wilfred Muliro Nasongo, both experts in research, policy and international relations, in studio to discuss Kenya's benefits from President William Ruto's trip to China. Do stand by for that conversation.
Oh yes. Hashtag Boni Cafe 22047 is our SMS number. 0793267279 is our WhatsApp number. Coming up later on at 8 a.m. Matters Kidney with Joy Magana. She is a clinical officer. You definitely want to stick around for that conversation. Usiende mbali, weka remote chini hapo, tunarudi saa hii tu.
Hey there friends, welcome to Kids on the Block, where fun and imagination come alive. We dive into magical world filled with exciting adventures and awesome friends.
What position were you in?
I was number 2.
What position were you?
Number 1.
He decided to cross the bridge by his house and look for food on the other side.
We're going to do half cup of chocolate chips, and the other one, we're going to do half cup of the blueberries.
So, grab your imagination hats and get ready to explore with us. Join us every Saturday at 9 a.m. for new friends, amazing stories, and tons of laughter.
Join us as we explore the journeys of those who defy the odds and break barriers. We dive deep into the stories of triumph.
Sometimes when parenting a child with a special need or whatever disability, family life becomes a bit complicated and you may end up raising the child on your own.
Here, we inspire.
I have a farm which one we showcase with other dyslexic youths and autism how to farm.
Motivate.
It's never easy, but what we do, the best thing is to work with another parent who has an elder child than yours.
And break through the barriers one story at a time. Push your boundaries beyond the limit. Saturdays at 8 p.m. The Grind, where business meets brilliance. It's not just about the ideas.
I was working as a shampoo boy. I used to wash clients' hair on the sink.
It's about making them happen. From big wins.
In primary school, when we would be asked what people want to be, I was categorical that I want to be a nurse.
To hard lessons.
The consoles change, the gaming equipment keep changing.
We cover it all. Tune in to The Grind, where every episode is packed with insights.
The person who is serving customers, always be a customer-centric.
Strategies.
When you pay attention to detail, you get luxury items.
And stories to fuel your ambition. Don't just dream it, grind it. Mondays at 7:30 p.m.
Jiunge nasi tunapoangazia safari za viongozi bora. Kutoka kwa ushindi mkubwa hadi masomo magumu.
Wakati wetu kwamba wasichana si wa kusoma, ni wa kuolewa, ng'ombe ipatikane, wazazi wakuwe watajiri.
Tunashughulikia yote.
I wish I were a better investor.
My parents taught me how to look for things for myself.
Tazama Mfahamu Kiongozi, ambapo kila kipindi kimejaa maarifa, mikakati na hadithi za kukuza azma yako.
For me to succeed, I have to fight.
Kila Alhamisi saa 1:30.
Hey there, friends. Welcome to Kids on the Block, where fun and imagination come alive. We dive into magical world filled with exciting adventures and awesome friends.
What position were you in?
I was number 2.
What position were you?
Number 1.
He decided to cross the bridge by his house and look for food on the other side.
We're going to do half cup of chocolate chips, and the other one, we're going to do half cup of the blueberries.
So, grab your imagination hats and get ready to explore with us. Join us every Saturday at 9 a.m. for new friends, amazing stories, and tons of laughter.
Join us as we explore the journeys of those who defy the odds and break barriers. We dive deep into the stories of triumph.
Sometimes when parenting a child with a special need or whatever disability, family life becomes a bit complicated and you may end up raising the child on your own.
Here, we inspire.
I have a farm which one we showcase with other dyslexic youths and autism, how to farm.
Motivate.
It's never easy, but what we do, the best thing is to work with another parent who has an elder child than yours.
And break through the barriers one story at a time. Push your boundaries beyond the limit. Saturdays at 8 p.m. The Grind, where business meets brilliance. It's not just about the ideas.
I was working as a shampoo boy. I used to wash clients' hair on the sink.
It's about making them happen. From big wins.
In primary school, when we would be asked what people want to be, I was categorical that I want to be a nurse.
To hard lessons.
The consoles change, the gaming equipment keep changing.
We cover it all. Tune in to The Grind, where every episode is packed with insights.
The person who is serving customers, always be a customer-centric.
Strategies.
When you pay attention to detail, you get...
Late disbursement. Our senior political reporter, Elizabeth Mutuku, has more.
The County of Meru.
Appearing before the Senate County Public Investments Committee, Auditor General Nancy Gathungu has raised fears of loss of taxpayers' money through firms which collect revenue for the counties through their failure to disclose the amount they collect as revenue for counties with the committee, insisting of the need to audit the companies to avert more losses.
Let's go back to what does the law say? And how do we curb this proliferation of so-called revenue service providers and these changes that keep occurring as and when? You have some counties, for every revenue stream has a different revenue service provider. That is wastage of resources.
This comes even as the Controller of Budget, Margaret Nyakango, proposed change in public laws in order to tighten the knot on revenue collection in the counties to curb the loss of public money. Further, the Auditor General has echoed Nyakango's call over the many commercial bank accounts used by counties in what she believes to be ways to siphon off taxpayers' funds.
A way that the auditor will, maybe the audit process will be faster, then you can actually be able to access it, like on a quarterly basis, and then allow us now to come in and then introduce the new amendments.
We now have established bursaries, and they're giving bursaries to secondary schools, and I thought secondary schools education is under national government. So now you have a problem, and I'm very glad that we're having a national conversation now on affordable education and how to minimize all these bursaries. There are quite a number. So I cannot say that 2 are enough or 3 are enough. It will depend on the situation, but more than 10, it's too much.
On the question of perennial pending bills in the counties, Gathungo insists that physical indiscipline on matter of pending bills is creating a loophole for some of the unscrupulous officers to benefit from public coffers.
In terms of delayed disbursement, and putting in mind as a finance committee, we ensure that we are very timely. Now then this, Madam Auditor General, then results to commercial loans by the counties. Then further to that, there's the issue, of course, of the audit. What's your take as far as this issue of commercial loans are concerned to the counties?
Will the control of budget stop at the vote level and then approve? Or should they extend to analysis of the procurement documentations? Or should the procurement documentations then remain a question of auditor at a time of audit? I think that's where I wanted to get clarity on.
Deducting pensions and other statutory deductions and not paying. So we are borrowing from our employees because we are diverting those deductions for use for other operations. And now we are borrowing from the suppliers in kind. They provide us services, they provide us goods, we don't pay. So pending bills, in my next summary, I'll put it as part of public debt.
Yeah, you've told me, but now...
Elizabeth Mutuko, TV47, Nairobi.
Now, shortly after the teachers' strike was halted and students and teachers went back to school and resumed their normal routine as the teachers prepare the candidates for national exams later this year. However, a number of teachers feel that some of their union leaders were coerced into calling off the strike and no longer trust their grievances will be addressed in a roundtable talks with Teacher Service Commission expected today. Anastasia Mukabi with more.
Immediately after a short notice to end the strike, teachers resumed and learning continued as usual.
Saizi wakati union imesema kwamba mkomo umeisha, walimu wamerejea. Kama kuna mmoja au wawili watatu wanne wanasukua kwa tatu matatizo yake ya kibinafsi.
Some schools have even started to prepare their candidates for the national exams.
As the academic programs are concerned, we are already set for term 3. We've already put in place all the necessary measures.
However, a section of teachers feel betrayed after they were asked to resume their work through the media.
We would be back to work, but at least there was need to give the indicators of the calling off of the strike, which was never done. It was brought to the teachers' attention from the media.
Some teachers feel that their Secretary General Akelo Misori was coerced into calling off the strike, the teachers demanding his resignation.
Held on Saturday, we knew that actually our views are going to be considered, but apparently we were sold. As teachers of this country, we were disappointed, we were not happy in him, and we feel, based on his age factor, he should resign and go home. We get the teachers to represent who knows the pleas of the teachers.
It is yet to be determined via tomorrow's negotiations whether teachers' issues will be fully addressed, since most of the teachers expressed willingness to once again march and fight for their rights. Anastasia Mukabi, TV47, Nairobi.
Now, families of missing persons arrived at the city mortuary yesterday in search of the bodies of their missing kin. Now, this was after the president of the Law Society of Kenya, Faith Adhiambo, alerted the public of plans by the county government of Nairobi to dispose of bodies currently stored at the city mortuary.
Is this an attempt to cover up for what truly transpired in Kware?
One day after the Law Society of Kenya President Faith Adhiambo claimed that there are plans for the disposal of bodies at the city mortuary, families of victims of Kware murders arrived at the city mortuary to identify the bodies of their missing kin.
And I dare say it's also quite unfortunate that we now see that the Nairobi County Council wants to dispose of the bodies that are at the city mortuary before identification.
We have reports from LSK and others, reliable reports that the county government of Nairobi is planning to dispose of the bodies that are here.
According to human rights activists, the disposal of bodies in City Mortuary by the government is an alleged plan to cover up for the Kware murder case. Vocal Africa's Hussein Khalid claims that the government is trying to cover up for the mysterious murder of 42 women whose bodies were discovered at the Kware dump site.
The question we are asking, is this an attempt to cover up for what truly transpired in Kware? Why is there so much haste in wanting to dispose of these bodies? The county government must tell us who is behind this decision to dispose of these bodies. Why are they pushing so much?
The human rights activists stated that no bodies should be disposed until they are positively identified by their loved ones. They further argued that Kware killings mystery has not been solved and the bodies should remain at the morgue for investigations to be completed.
Why have they suspended the retrieval of bodies from the Kware? What is the objective of the county government of Nairobi in ensuring that we can confirm the identity of these bodies? Why are they in such a hurry?
The president of the Law Society of Kenya on Tuesday evening insisted that nobody should be disposed when there are missing persons who were abducted and are yet to be released by the government.
Because we never know if these are part of the bodies that may end up being disposed. And so as the Law Society, we are urging the courts to remember that they must protect the people of Kenya.
Samira Mohammed for TV 47.
President William Ruto yesterday kicked off a high-level diplomatic engagement in China to campaign for former Prime Minister Raila Odinga's candidacy in his quest to succeed Musa Faki Mahamat as chairperson of the African Union Commission. The president, accompanied by Raila Odinga, met 7 African presidents, 6 of them from Francophone countries, on the sidelines of the ongoing Forum on China-Africa Cooperation in Beijing, China. Apollo Kamau has more.
Our former Prime Minister.
President William Ruto led a high-level diplomatic engagement with his fellow heads of state and government in Beijing, China, to campaign for former Prime Minister Raila Odinga in his quest to succeed Musa Faki Mahamat of Chad as the next African Union Commission chair. President Ruto, flanked by Odinga, Foreign Affairs Cabinet Secretary Musalia Mudavadi, and his Principal Secretary Dr. Korir Sing'oei, as well as Kisii Governor Simba Arati, among other government officials, drummed up support for Odinga as a Pan-Africanist, a champion of integrated infrastructure, and a leader committed to peace and security on the continent. According to PS Korir, all the presidents pledged to support Odinga's bid. Wednesday's back-to-back high-level diplomatic engagements were crucial for Odinga and Kenya as they focused on the West African bloc, days after the East African community threw its weight behind Odinga's bid in Nairobi. Kenya is keen not to make this an Anglophone versus Francophone divide, but a Pan-African interest-driven agenda, with PS Korir saying many countries recognize Kenya's continental contribution across a range of sectors and its ability to project a stronger Africa on the global stage. With Odinga set to deliver a keynote speech on infrastructure during the forum on Thursday, President Ruto is said to have implored his colleagues that Odinga is best suited to steer reforms at the African Union, terming his leadership as effective, knowledgeable, and full of experience. Odinga's main rival, Mahamoud Yusuf of Djibouti, is also attending the Beijing summit in a high-stakes diplomacy offensive ahead of the February 25th vote. Apul Kamau, TV 47.
Now, the government has set up plans for Kenyans traveling overseas to work in home care management sector to receive practical-based training. This is a move that will see the caregivers achieve necessary skills that will attract employment opportunity overseas. Speaking at the National Industrial Training Authority in Mombasa, Cabinet Secretary for Labour and Social Protection, Dr. Alfred Mutua, urged Kenyans to embrace the move, which will streamline identification and protection and make sure agents and trainers earn a living. However, Kenyans have been challenged to embrace professional labor migration. Elsewhere, NITA is committed to ensuring best practices and standards when training and certifying caregivers.
country has been facing many challenges, mostly made of bureaucracy, crooked actors in the industry, and lack of trust. So my main aim is to streamline how the training is done, to streamline the identification of people going overseas, the protection, and also ensuring that the agents who are recruiting are also making money. The trainers also making money. So I've been listening to their challenges, and I'll be calling a meeting in Nairobi soon to lay out new procedures, new ways of operating, to ensure that our people are well trained to go overseas for many jobs. Let them have a house that looks like where the people are going to work. Unaamka asubuhi, unaenda kitchen, unapika chakula ile wanakulanga, unapepea meza vizuri, unaenda unafua nguo vizuri according to the machines they found in Saudi Arabia or in Dubai or in Kuwait or in Oman or in Austria or wherever you're going, so that life skill is very practical. It is not based on pictures that utaenda utakute kwa namna hii, so that by the time they're done with the training wameiva kabisa, and they'll go plug and play, and then Kenyan workers will be known to be the most efficient and the best in the world, because they are. It's only a matter of empowering them. We want our young people to go overseas and work in many sectors. We don't just let them going to work in the home care area. They can go to home care, but we want them to go as engineers, to go as doctors, as nurses, as teachers. I want them to go as ICT specialists, as hospitality players.
Kenya so far confirmed 4 cases of Mpox, but there are concerns that the virus could spread further following rumors of a looming strike among healthcare workers over delayed salaries. Elizabeth Atieno reports.
Nakuru County is the most recent county to record an Mpox case on the 31st of August 2024. And now the health department at the Nakuru County government maintains the situation has since been contained and that there is no new Mpox case reported in the county.
The only patient that we have is one that is isolated in our isolation center in Nakuru referral hospital. Is that 7-year-old male who is a truck driver.
Watu wote walikuja kwa karibu na huyo mgonjwa already wamewatrace na wamekuwa tested.
So far, Kenya has reported 4 confirmed Mpox cases. However, this low number is no comfort following concerns over the spread in Mpox in light of the looming paralysis of health services delivery in some counties like Nakuru and Kisii through the threat of a strike. The strike fears emerged from county health workers decrying the alleged neglect by the county government following delayed salaries.
We have a problem with salaries. We've worked for 2 months in this county and we've not been paid. Tumelipwa ya 1 month, of which I believe hiyo pesa yote imeenda kwa madeni. You find one nurse managing like 40 to 60 patients.
I've been working day and night, and there is no allowance for laboratory. Other cadres, they have the allowances.
In Kisii County, the doctors, clinicians and nurses have issued a 14-day strike notice as they urge the county government to work with speed and implement the signed memorandum of understanding.
Arbitrary transfers is one of the things we signed the return to work formula for. Number 2, there are 3 clinicians who have never been paid for the last 25 months.
We are giving actually the county government of Kisii a notice of 14 days. Kindly honor the memorandum of understanding signed.
Elsewhere, clinicians through the Union Secretary General George Gibore have maintained that the hospitals and healthcare providers are not well prepared to curb the spread of Mpox should an outbreak occur.
Na sisi tunataka kusema kama wahudumu wa afya hatujapendezwa kwa sababu hawajaweza kuhamasisha wahudumu wa afya ambao ndio wanakuwa kama ndio soldiers wa kuweza kupigana na magonjwa haya.
Elizabeth Atieno, TV47, Nairobi.
All right, just before we go on a break, allow me to introduce my panelists as we look forward to discussing Kenya-China ties. This morning, we're privileged to have in studio Ambassador Dr. Josephine Ojiambo and Wilfred Muliro Nasongo, both experts in policy research and international relations. So do stand by for that conversation. There have been so many questions and a lot of skepticism about President William Ruto's trip to China. They'll be here to tell us what this country stands to benefit from that trip. You're watching Morning Cafe.
Twende kazi DJ. Get ready to party. It's about to be lit, it's about to be legit. It's about to be fire because the Saturday gang has officially landed.
Huko ngabado nachukuliwa madam so anguka nao ita.
Hey there friends, welcome to Kids on the Block, where fun and imagination come alive. We dive into magical world filled with exciting adventures and awesome friends.
What position were you in?
I was number 2.
What position were you?
Number 1.
He decided to cross the bridge by his house and look for food on the other side.
We're going to do half cup of chocolate chips. And the other one, we're going to do half cup of the blueberries.
So, grab your imagination hats and get ready to explore with us. Join us every Saturday at 9 a.m. for new friends, amazing stories, and tons of laughter.
Join us as we explore the journeys of those who defy the odds and break barriers. We dive deep into the stories of triumph.
Sometimes when parenting a child with a special need or whatever disability, family life becomes a bit complicated and you may end up raising the child on your own.
Here, we inspire.
I have a farm which one we showcase with other dyslexic youths and autism, how to farm.
Motivate.
It's never easy, but what we do, the best thing is to work with another parent who has an elder child than yours.
And break through the barriers one story at a time. Push your boundaries beyond the limit. Saturdays at 8 p.m. The Grind, where business...
I had introduced my panelists earlier, but allow me to introduce them once again. Ambassador Dr. Josephine Ojiambo, expert in research policy and international relations. It's good to have you in studio.
Thank you very much, Fred.
Also with us this morning is Wilfred Muliro Nasongo, foreign policy and security specialist. It's good to have you, sir, in studio as well.
Thank you.
Now, if you look at the dailies this week, at least today, they've stayed away from the trip, but I think it was yesterday, the front page of the Standard was talking about more projects, more debt. And all the cartoons on the dailies were a bit skeptical about the president's trip to China. And many people feel that we are going there. One cartoon yesterday had a caricature of the president with a begging bowl. And that appears to be the perception back home. Many Kenyans feel that such trips could end up burdening Kenya more. But from where you sit, there must be straight benefits that we stand to gain, even in the short term, from such a trip. Let's start from there, Ambassador.
Thank you very much. Indeed, it's an important trip for all of us to consider. And I think why? Because This is the second time the president has been to China, so there must be something of value in our engagement with China. And he's going to the 9th Forum of China and African Cooperation. I think there are 4 things that we need to look at in terms of this trip. We know that indeed there's the issue, like you've said, of engagements around trade. There will be the issues of job creation, which are very important to our economy and to the people of Kenya. There'll be the need for us to look at infrastructure. We know we already have debt related to our standard gauge railway, so infrastructure as a discussion. But then also the need for us to engage in people-to-people relations on this trip. And we have also understood that the former Prime Minister, the Right Honorable Raila Odinga, has accompanied the head of state on this trip to discuss with other heads of state the upcoming AU election. So when we look at those as being key areas for the need to visit China, I definitely think those are important to all Kenyans. So despite the skepticism, I think we can be assured that there will be pearls brought home, benefits brought home to us. I think when you think about the platform on which we are visiting, the head of state is visiting, it's important that we take into consideration the fact that Kenya has just joined the Asian Infrastructure Investment Forum. And this forum allows Kenya to access concessionary loans that will be offered with lower interest rates, but loans that will be offered around very important parts of our economy, the issues of agriculture, the issues of industrial growth, so that they indeed are different from the loans we are getting from the US-backed IMF and World Bank that have been a burden on Kenya, because those loans have with them conditionalities about cuts in social spending, conditionalities around interest rates that have caused the population of Kenyans to feel burdened. So we know that this engagement, especially on the forum of the AIIB, will bring back financing mechanisms that are easier for Kenyans and Kenya to manage.
Yes, and still on this issue of skepticism, because this trip comes only about 3 months after the president went for a state visit in the US. And the same concerns were there, that you're going there with a begging bowl and probably you're just going to increase the debt burden. If you could draw comparisons between what the president went, his trip to the US and his trip to China, because there's also concern that the president, and there's always this debate, is he turning west, is he turning east? Yeah. How do you assess the difference between these two trips?
And thank you very much, Fred. I'm happy to be here, been to places, but this is the first time here.
Karibu sana TV47.
And that's a very important question, just to pick from where Ambassador stopped. You know, Kenya is not, as they say, literally, is not an island in international relations. We say that immediately you become a sovereign state, recognized internationally, then you have to interact with other states, because there is no singular state that has all that it needs sufficiently provided. Even if it is the US, you'll find that you'll have something that Togo has, which you'll need. And I think, for me, where I sit, it was important for the president to personally lead a heavy delegation to China immediately after we have had that fanfare in the US. For this reason, that we had skepticism was more about what you mentioned, that Kenya is becoming a vassal state for the US. And you are literally saying that Kenya is now literally hinged to the West. But I think when he moves to China, we are, the president and Kenya is trying to send a message to the world that we have an independent foreign policy. And we are becoming more bold. And as some people have said, that maybe we are adopting, going back to what they said, positive non-alignment, that we don't just remain, as the young people say, tone deaf. You know, we don't want to be on any side, but then we mean We are neutral, but where our interests are served, we move there without looking over our shoulders. And I think it's important that we demonstrate that, as the President said, we are looking forward, neither east or west. Many African states are doing that. And Fred, you need to remember that at this time, I think Kenyans, including even the government, must not feel like pressured during those days of the Cold War. We are aware maybe there is a new Cold War, China and the US, again in Africa, but the geostrategic position of Kenya puts it in a place where it can even, it will not suffer if it plays an independent foreign policy. Look at what South Africa is doing, but it's not as geostrategic as Kenya. South Africa has a very bold foreign policy, but it still gets this foreign support, whether it is from China, is a member of BRICS, is a very still close ally of the US. South Africa has led a case against Israel, is playing a bold foreign policy. And I think Kenya should take that position. And we as Kenyans should not be thinking that we are beholden to the West, and therefore, if you make a bold decision in foreign policy, then you'll be punished. No, I think, just to add on what you're saying, begging ball, if you look at what I mentioned, the location of Kenya, geostrategic position of Kenya, we can be what Roosevelt mentioned one time, that the US is with due respect, is a beautiful lady who does not need to go out. It's the suitors that must come. They were playing the foreign policy of isolationism because they thought they were very useful at that time after the World War. So again, for us, we are important. The US has been jettisoned from the Sahel. The US is facing challenges just across here in Djibouti, where there's so many military bases, and is thinking of shifting. So you look at China itself, when you look at the Belt and Road Initiative, its core, the node that now enters into Africa, is in Kenya. So China needs Kenya more, just like the US also needs Kenya. So I believe maybe when our leaders go there, they are going with this mind that we are useful. We are not begging. We must be bold enough. We are coming to interact and tell you that we are now a clear alternative in the Horn of Africa and the entire Eastern Africa region.
Okay.
Thank you.
And of course, as Bwana Nasong clearly says, there seems to be a scramble of some sort for African nations between the US especially and China. And coming straight from the US and within months going to China, it probably, as he says, you need to create a balance as a country. But we have had a relationship with China. And many Kenyans are correct and right in their skepticism about our relationship, especially when it comes to infrastructure financing. The SGR, there have been a lot of questions about how the funding was done and how the money was spent. And now suggestion is that we could be seeking more in extending that project. Many Kenyans are wondering, is it the right time for such an undertaking?
Let's first discuss the first part of your question, the issue of accountability. And accountability lies with both sides of the equation, both with Kenya and of course with China. And indeed there has been a lot of controversy, question about the SGR project. But I think if you go back in time, not too long ago, you will remember that in the twilight days of the last regime, although overtures were made for additional funding, the Chinese government did not come to the table. China too is keen on the issues of accountability. In fact, as a nation, China actually provides very heavy punishment to individuals and organizations that are found to engage in corruption. And I think China's response by not offering any further financing to Kenya at that time is an indication of their need to have us look again at our own levels of transparency and accountability. Given that as a platform on which we engage, then this engagement will be on a fresh page, a page where accountability will be called for both sides of the table. So I think we've started on a new page. Kenyans themselves are calling out the regime, the Kenya Kwanza government, to deliver. We have a lot going on in the social media today about the need to complete stalled projects, the need to address the promises made to the people of Kenya. And I think one of the outreaches of the head of state will be to bring back support to complete stalled projects and to ensure that those that have been promised are undertaken. In fact, we understand during this trip, there will be some 40 billion Kenya shillings set aside for 15 counties to complete stalled projects. And this is because there has been a very heavy criticism of the regime. So I want to say that on both sides of the table, there is a push for greater accountability.
Okay. Yet the concerns are still there about our relationship and how generally African nations relate with the West or the East. And it would appear it's, and we talked about it earlier, the begging bowl phenomenon, that the best way we relate with these countries or superpowers is what they give us. And back home, the conversation about our debt situation is what has dominated our headlines for the longest time. The president says this is the reason why the cost of living is high, our debt situation. So when we see, and the discussion is we're just getting more funding, more loans, more grants for infrastructure, one wonders, is it really a priority right now? Should we take everything that comes our way simply because it's on offer?
I think, Fred, you know, it's your question brings a situation of, a puzzle for the government. And the issue is that at personal level, you have borrowing is a way of resetting yourself to get better. And from what Ambassador said, if the debt burden is not so much about borrowing, it's so much about embezzlement. How have we used the resources that we are given? Do we use them to take off and therefore improve ourselves for the best? And therefore, Kenyans, in their own ways, we saw in the previous months, the young generation and the people have reset our country, especially in matters of governance and corruption. And I can see a glimmer from very far in terms of the government being very careful in how its own even local revenue is being used. But I would say this, Fred, the date issue has become not just an African load, but is a global challenge. If you look at the leading countries that, or China, US is among, I think for Africa is below even 1% of what they are giving, but the 60s and the rest are across there. But when countries extend aid to another country, there is a level of give and take. It's not just that now you are like what we do, you find a fellow wretched Kenyan with a ball on the street and you give and go, you don't even remember the name. But they're doing this because there is some geostrategic interest in that country. There's interest for these global powers to open up Africa, the Belt and Road Initiative. The US itself has tried its own on the SADC side to open. When I look at the standard gauge railway and you ask whether it is a priority, I think it should have been done as it was programmed earlier up to even DRC. If we open up this region, the aspect that Africa has been singing of connectivity, sharing infrastructure. How do you do that if we have, for instance, Africa has almost 16 landlocked countries. How do they access the easiest ways to the sea if there is no connectivity? And therefore, Africa is looking at this time round, let us be able to borrow for the purposes of increasing connectivity and opening up our spaces to increase intra-Africa trade so that we can get outside. So if we muzzle that and just say that we can isolate ourselves, then what next are we going to do for ourselves? We have the resources. We are still struggling. We have not reached the middle level, Fred, in terms of technology takeoff. So we still rely on technology from elsewhere to have what we have. But I can tell you, I think, the generation itself in Africa, across Africa, because the weight of Africa, as you mentioned very well, this scramble for Africa, in my view, I think, the battleground is going to be within the space of the young generation. You know, initially it used to be, are you at the coast? Then it came, do you have oil? And that is diminishing. But now, the external world knows where the power of Africa lies, and that is where there'll be the battleground. And the joy of this is that that young generation that is going to make Africa the strongest continent in the future is much informed. And issues of governance and use, I believe, that's my optimism, Fred, that we will not be thinking about the debt burden, but we'll be thinking about how have we been able to accelerate aspects like even African Continental Free Trade Area by borrowing? How have we been able to attract? I believe it's not only, Ambassador, in terms of maybe financial support. We're thinking of how do we attract foreign investment within our land. And I think I listened to a few African presidents who are talking about, instead of manufacturing from this end of the world and bringing, why can't you come and pitch come in our country so that you help us with issues of employment and the rest?
What about the optics of it from a diplomacy standpoint? Because our president is on record initially saying that he's not really for this idea of one superpower summoning 20, 30 African leaders to that country to go meet one president. If at all there is a real scramble for Africa, shouldn't they be the ones coming here? After all, they have a need. How come it's today Russia-Africa Summit, then China-Africa Summit, and a number of heads of states have to travel that way, in as far as optics is concerned?
Well, it's just last year when President Xi Jinping was in South Africa. And when he was there, he actually spoke to 3 issues: industrialization, the agricultural revolution, and talent. And I want to speak about talent a little bit because I've heard my dear brother Wilfred mention it. The issue of talent as it relates to the young people on the African continent, and the fact that we need to, like China did, look at the skills development of young people in order that they have a future of opportunity. And I think if you go back and look at China's story, this is 2 decades ago when China was, in quotes, similar to us, largely agricultural, but today, 2 decades later, is a fast-forward industrial nation. And what did they do? They looked at providing skills to their young people to make them market ready, give them talent and give them skills that are fit for the market. And where did they think about skilling them up? They looked at adding value to agriculture by putting industries in place so that they don't sell raw products to the rest of the world, but they actually give value to their own outputs in an industrial setting. And so, whereas we are looking for support to kickstart some of our economic requirements, this support is being actually channeled very carefully to job creation by putting it into improving our TVETs, giving skills at that level for manufacturing, for industry, for agricultural entrepreneurship, to the technical space technology, where we have lots of incoming Chinese support in terms of technical skills in the technology area, but also just being sure that we have the right fit in our own economies. I think this market readiness is a place where we can actually grow the greatest number of jobs. Beyond that, if you look at other places where we are getting support, let's look at the infrastructure. Yes, there's been a lot of discussion about the SGR, but opening up our country has improved trade. And right now, you talked about the scramble for Africa from China. The truth is, actually, I think there are 10,000 kilometers of rail put down in this Belt and Rail project, and 100,000 kilometers of roads through the same project. But this is opening up specific regions of Africa to other regions. We know there's going to be the extension of the SGR. This has been requested, and this support will take it from Naivasha, where it's stalled, all the way to the western region, opening us up to Uganda, to Rwanda, to DRC. Obviously, this trade is going to bring back many times more the investment. So some of what we've gone to ask for will bring back, one, job creations, better opportunities for the young people of our country, opening up trade, improving our GNP, so that in a manner of speaking, we get back more than we actually took.
Okay. Let's talk more about infrastructure. And yes, there's the SGR, which has been much talked about. And there's also the issue of about this dueling of the Rironi-Mau Summit road, which had initially been awarded to a French company, and now this has been transferred to China. How does that play out? Because even in terms of Kenya's foreign relations, when you move one project from a company in France to a company in China, what does that say about Kenya and its approach to this infrastructure? Are we giving too much to China? Are we depending too much on one country?
I think, Fred, you know, there is a saying that the West will promise, but China will do it. And then they say Japan will perform better, but China will take the credit. You know, because we in Africa, whether it is Japan, then they say it's China that has done that, but their work is quality. But then, if you look at even the Express, if you look at many of this one is called what, this road to Mai Mahiu. Those are roads that were negotiated. I think Ambassador is better placed because she's been in the CC long during the time of Mwai Kibaki, with Western countries, France included, the US. But then at the end of the day, which country came and performed? You know, it's just the same story I'm telling you. Kenya should move in that manner. That it be independent, just like what South Africa is doing, what Rwanda is doing, what Ethiopia is doing. African countries are becoming assertive because we have something to offer. Without the strategic entry of Lamu, Lapset, and Kenya into Africa, China's BRI, Belt and Road Initiative, will go to zero in Africa. So we look at who does it faster. And remember, Fred, you are right. I know at the back of your mind, in your heart of hearts, you know the reason that the president is narrowed, you know, in his designs. He's crafting something for 2027. And we know locally the decibel, political barometers in the mountain versus his position in the previous election. So some of the major projects that his opponents are using to raise the flag that he has abandoned the people who voted for him is the road you've mentioned, the Mao one. And validly so for the local politics, he has to prioritize that. But then also globally, France, in my opinion, is no longer in that league of the global powers that you have mentioned, the game of scramble for Africa. It's a diminished global power. It may be able to offer support in other areas. France itself is facing challenges of demographic challenges in terms of aging populations. You are looking at issues of, they have their own demonstrations in matters of the quality of life, pension and the rest. But the real players, I can tell you, in terms of infrastructure and in terms of major reforms, is basically maybe the emerging powers within the BRICS, and we are looking at China, India, and Japan. Okay. On the other side, Japan is not a member of BRICS, but then the emerging powers, and we are looking at the US slowly. You know, the US is constrained by two aspects. One, its long-held foreign policy of values, that is democracy, anti-corruption, civil society. And then the second one, they are moving through a transition of elections at this time. So commitments are not as clear as binding. But for China, it has remained consistent with its foreign policy of poverty and non-interference. For them, non-interference, they mean matters of governance, especially what type of democracy. They keep on saying that. Rules-based. They say, who sets the rules? We should all be together. So for them, they believe You remember the Chinese ambassador, I think, ambassador, remember they were accused at the UN General Assembly for tolerating dictatorship in Africa with their perspective of non-interference. And they said the best human rights is to have money in the pocket first, in their view. So they think if you're very poor, then that is more an oppression of human rights than even voting in a person through democracy. So I think, in my view, infrastructural development, the government of Kenya, led by His Excellency William Ruto, is looking at that in two ways, sorting out the domestic politics, the pressure that is there, in terms of crafting the 2027 election, and in terms of managing the youth restiveness. And number two is raising the image of Kenya as a bold country that is asserting itself with a very independent foreign policy that is not attached to the East or the West. Okay. So we are with everybody. Okay. Maybe tomorrow we will be in the Gulf states. Okay. Yes.
But allow me to throw a spanner in the works, and I know this is not the main discussion, but there's a whole issue of the Raila Odinga's bid for the AUC position. And the challenge that many people have raised is the Francophone, French-speaking countries in Africa, and the kind of influence that France could have on some of these nations. Is there a possibility of a complication when such a major project is taken from a French company and given to China? Could that play in a way? And I'm just at the top of my head thinking of a possible complication.
Well, Fred, yeah, it's something to think about. But I think what we will do as the community of diplomats in Kenya is to help navigate this path, so that indeed there may be an issue on the one hand of non-delivery of an agreement in 2019 to have put a road in place, and the need for us to put the road in place and get support from China. So there will be a way for us to navigate that, and we will be sure that whatever legal issues need to be addressed, they will be addressed, and in the most diplomatic manner, so that is put aside on the shelf. But the issue of the AU bid, that's another page. And I think one of the things that our country is doing and the team is doing in the campaign is making sure it's not an Anglophone, Francophone affair, but it's a rather whole of Africa, Pan-African affair. And based on that platform, I think we will achieve greater good for Africa. It's time now we rose above the colonialism that has been the heritage of our past, that might be or might have been useful then, but is definitely not going to be useful in the future. So the Right Honourable Raila Odinga's campaign is based on the whole of Africa. And I think we are all aware that China really has a major influence in the African Union. We know that China built the wonderful office headquarters for the African Union free of charge. And like we've said earlier in this discussion, China's influence in Africa, particularly on the east coast of Africa, goes back, I think, many centuries, 6 centuries ago indeed. So their interest in Africa and the ability to convene African leadership is nothing new. And what I think our campaign team for the Right Honourable Odinga will do is make sure that they meet with African heads of state that are aligned to China in this modern socio-economic era, and talk with them about mutual interests that would be part of the Right Honourable's agenda for his bid for the AU seat. And more than that, I think they'll be interested to have China's support, even if as an observer for the Right Honourable Odinga's campaign.
You take on the same issue?
Yes. I think Ambassador is right. You know, there is a delicate balancing. France is not a very aggressive, far-fetched ally of Kenya. We are very close allies. And I am sure maybe there has been back-channel negotiations, and then maybe you will do something else. Let this be done here, just like the express road. But then remember, Fred, that for the Forum on China-Africa, FOCAC, cooperation, the African Union is a member, an independent member, very strong. Member, in fact, at another level, is a co-host. And I think, as Ambassador has mentioned, is a very good strategy, in my view, for those running I don't know whether she must be among. Are you a member of that? But those running the AUC campaign for the former Prime Minister so far are doing very well strategically because remember the former Prime Minister was a high representative for infrastructure. And I just heard in your news here, I didn't know that, I just heard this time that he'll have an opportunity to talk about that. And number two, it is actually the African Union that has been pushing for opening up the continent in terms of infrastructural connectivity. And it's very important that we take our candidate as Kenyans to pitch his campaigns and also showcase his ability to push that agenda in terms of China. And again, Ambassador, you're very right in that case that in my view, China has more sway on the continent than France. On the continent, the uprising of anti-colonial push by the younger generation and even those assertiveness of the latter-day leaders in Africa is more about removing any form of neocolonialism. And France has had it very rough in its areas, whether it is Niger, Mali, and even in Rwanda here. You can see that the French footprints have been swept away. Yes, diminished totally. And therefore, we do not expect that France will have a sway on the story of Francophone and Anglophone. But I would want to add this, that just like what in his speech the former Prime Minister said, you know, it's not Anglophone, it's not Francophone, it is Africaphone. And he's wearing the coat of Pan-Africanism, which is right, actually. He should dress himself. Actually, the candidate should be now a Pan-Africanist. These very complicated topics of climate change and democracy and the rest, they still, you know, I've observed the young generation, even when they were demonstrating with placards, you know, against IMF, against the US, there's that feeling that some aspects of society, the agenda that Africa drives is more Western, is more external than African. And some of that is issues when we are told carbon credits, we are told issues like democracy, by what measure? We are told issues of human rights. I saw those aspects of, I don't know whether I'm chattering, those were LGBTQ. Those are aspects that Africans are slowly seeing that whether their values respected elsewhere, they may not necessarily be homegrown on the continent. And therefore, wearing the coat of Pan-Africanism and slightly leaving out these sophisticated topics is, I think, is the best way to go. And in my view, you remember when our candidate, maybe Ambassador was there, our candidate lost, that is Ambassador Amina, at the African Union Commission when we lost. One, I think it was Professor Dediji or somebody wrote an article and said, to him, what he has seen after the elections was the biggest shame in the continent. And the idea was that we are Africans meeting at the African Union to chart a way for our own leadership of our own continent. But eventually, the voting went down to Anglophone and Francophone, colonial languages. So you're saying, I wish it was maybe
Are you saying this time round
yes,
will be different?
This time round, I have a feeling. Remember, many of the African leaders, there have been changes. We may have young people coming in, but we also may have later-day assertive leaders, including even maybe we can put our own president in that team of young assertive leaders that can see through the perspectives of neocolonialism. So I expect and I believe if there is any candidate driving on the trajectory of Francophone and Anglophone, our campaigners must bring that candidate clearly out so that it is now running against Pan-Africanism. So you are driving your agenda as Djibouti, as Francophone, but Kenya should drive the agenda of Pan-Africanism. And then the leaders must be able now to choose between the Francophone, Anglophone candidate and the Pan-African candidate.
Okay. Away from the AU bid, AUC chairperson's bid. There's a photo on the front page of the Daily Nation of a number of these heads of states and with their spouses. And talking about the soft touch of diplomacy and as far as people-to-people ties, what does this photo mean? We having our first lady there, and even President Xi Jinping having his spouse there as well. Ambassador.
Well, we haven't really gone away from the AU's campaign. It's part of the AU campaign.
That's her forte.
But I'd like to say something. Not too long ago, in fact, just last week, I participated in what we call FESTAC. FESTAC is, this was the 5th World Festival of Black and African Art and Culture in Kisumu, hosted by the governor of Kisumu, Professor Nyong'o, with the support of the FESTAC team. And the festival was actually officiated by none other than the Right Honorable Raila Odinga and the former President Olusegun Obasanjo. And one of the very important sessions within that lovely Pan-African gathering was not only the discussion of culture and art as a unifying mechanism for African nations, the table in terms of not only their specific office, but what that office contributes in terms of social and economic development. So when we see the first ladies in that picture, I want to bring back the picture of the first spouses alongside the governors who came to this meeting or represented at that meeting, and their office in terms of what it contributes to socio-economic advancement. I think that's how we should look at that picture. I also want to say that behind every successful man, they say there is an equally able member of the family called the wife or spouse. So I think this is an important reflection about the campaign. You do see that it's a state dinner. So this was a social activity, and it's a group photo. So the heads of state who traveled with their spouses had them in the picture.
Yes, the need for that soft touch as well does come out. It's beyond the serious conversations about infrastructure and trade. There's an issue of people-to-people ties. Probably that's where the spouses come in.
You're right. You're right. You've done it well. You're correct. And that is the issue. I was actually seeing, apart from ambassadors, very well put associated with that, there is a soft touch, the people-to-people relations that initially I know there were those pictures and they used to not to look so well. It was, and you people in the media used to say it was a strong men's meeting in China or anywhere. But now we can see the aspect of people to people and then the soft power element. There is this aspect of first lady diplomacy. I think Hillary Clinton wrote a book about, there's a book about that, how she was able, to use her channels to push more in US foreign policy than even the mainstream foreign policy perspectives. So I think China, you are right. China is very good in soft power. It's known for that, by the way. It's known for that. While on the US, we know it's more of hard stick and carrot. But China is, even their demeanor itself, I think within their private agreement of their foreign policies that you always come from the perspective of an underdog to win. So you find that they are the soft percolating. So I can tell you, Fred, that even this almost looks like ambassador. This, we see this during days of state visits. That's when you have a banquet for